President Bola Ahmed Tinubu yesterday directed Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, to within 2 days come up with the cost implications of an affordable, sustainable and realistic new minimum wage for Nigerian workers. The directive came as organized labor resolved to suspend its nationwide strike for the next 1 week. Both Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress yesterday directed their state branches to ask members to resume work immediately. Equally yesterday, Senate pledged that the National Minimum Wage Bill would be given accelerated hearing anytime the President forwards it to the National Assembly for legislative action. But the House of Representatives cautioned the federal government against increasing the minimum wage beyond what the economy could sustain. Tinubu gave the marching order to Edun at a closed-door meeting with the government negotiation team on the new minimum wage led by Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume at State House, Abuja. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, made the president's order known while speaking to newsmen after the closed-door meeting.
The President has directed the Minister of Finance to do the numbers and get back to him between today and tomorrow so that we can have some figures ready for negotiation with Labour. Let me say that Mr. President is determined to go with what the committee has said. He is also looking at the welfare of Nigerians. Like I've said earlier, government is not against, it's not an opponent of Labour discussions, it's not an opponent of wage increase, but what is there is that government is always desirous of ensuring that there is a balance between what government pronouncement is and what the realities are on ground, and therefore we'll work assiduously to ensure that whatever we do, whatever promises the government makes will be kept. That's the idea of this meeting. The President has given a marching order that all those who have negotiated on behalf of government and all those also who are representative of other sectors, the organized private sector, the subnationals, come together so that we can have a new wage award that is acceptable, that is sustainable, and that is also realistic for Nigeria.
Marching orders by the president. Rufai, I would have imagined that the cost implications would have already been done prior to going to negotiations. But your take on this story?
So for me, it's a vindication of all I have said on this table every day. That there's no well thought out research, there's no empirical thought process. We feel our way in the dark, and it's an indictment. I would have expected various cost implications across various iterations since the negotiation started. I would have even expected them since this government got into power. And apart from Mr. Wale Edun coming up with a cost, where is the Ministry of National Planning in all of this? It's supposed to plan for the country. So where are the research departments? In fact, going further, I would have also expected cost iterations for the cost of the government and also for inflation. Because even with 100,000, there's going to be a knock-on effect on inflation. It's not just going to be as much as the 400,000 or thereabout.
Yeah, 494.
494,000. Anything, there's going to be a knock-on effect. So that's part of the planning we say is lacking in this government. And is lacking big time. So please, going further, national planning should also iterate scenarios like this. There's something called scenario planning. The other day when we were talking about South Africa elections, I wasn't surprised at what happened in South Africa because I had read a book from a scenario planner, Frank Coggen, A Time Traveler's Guide to South Africa 2030. That book was written 2014, where he had iterated different scenarios. In fact, there's another good friend of mine that iterated some possible scenarios as regards what is happening in Nigeria today. His name is Olumayowa Okediran. Wrote a book on scenario planning. I would have thought that they had planned out this scenario. That's number one. The second point was, did the government have to allow labor go through a strike and strangulate the economy for a day before they wake up? It just shows insensitivity on the plight of the government. And they treated this with kid love all this while. But what the Tripartite Committee was so concerned about was a memo that leaked that when they sent a memo to the president, they released 1 billion for this negotiation and said, start with 500 million. Anything is money, money, money. That's what they are quick to share. The real work, we couldn't get it out. And thirdly, the National Assembly members that say they should not play something that they will not be able to pay out, which they will not be able to pay, that will have an effect on the economy. Good advice, yes, but also, can they also start by making sacrifices? I think we are giving them 344 billion from over 200 billion Buhari used to give them. I think the money was about the 250 billion mark. Can they also take 100 billion cuts, the National Assembly? Or because times are very austere, can they also just shave off the 200 billion cut so that we invest it in education and other things? So the money goes back to 150 billion and reduce their salaries to start with. Because these people are getting the hardship allowance. The National Assembly are getting hardship allowance when Nigerians that are facing the hardship are getting nothing.
Okay, what is the context? The new national minimum wage of 2019 expired early April. So, because it has a 5-year lifespan. Now, in another 5 years, we're still going to be back at the same spot, discussing what should be the new national minimum wage. Now, the second issue is electricity hike from 66 naira per kilowatt hour to 225 kilowatt hour within band A, which government says will provide 20 hours. Those are the two issues that Labour is focusing upon. But as to the direct issue of minimum wage and electricity act, Labour decided to go on strike on Monday, shutting down the economy with very serious effect. The national grid was shut down, airlines could not travel, members of the Super Eagles team who had come home to go to camp in Uyo could not travel until a private jet was provided for them, for 5 of them yesterday, to go to camp. I mean, other people suffered a lot of other losses. The banks were not open, so businesses could not really run. However, due to the intervention of the National Assembly and the federal government, Labour decided to relax. The word in that their statement is relax, as Festus Osifo tried to point out in one television interview. He didn't say they have suspended. He says they have relaxed it because they still have their hand on the trigger. And that if, after that 1 week relaxation, they don't see any result, they will go back to status quo. But in the meantime, workers have been addressed and asked to return to their workstations. Now, the president, in response to this, summoned all the ministers that were involved in the negotiation on the federal government side. Minister of Budget and National Planning, Minister of Information, Minister of Finance, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, the Group CEO of NMPCL, and the Chief of Staff to the President, and Nkuruka Onyejocha, the Minister of Labour. And at that meeting, we were told that the President gave the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister marching orders to come up within 48 hours with how much it will cost Nigeria. However, there has been no indication for the presidential side about how much Wale Edun is supposed to calculate. They have kept that to their chest. The only thing we know is that the federal government is saying is ready to now pay beyond 54, beyond 57, pay beyond something more than 60,000 naira. What we also know is that Labour, speaking through Festus Osifo, says, let them not come with 1,000 naira, 2,000 naira, 3,000 naira increase. Punch newspaper was reporting this morning that according to an insider, Labour is looking at about 100,000. So whatever the calculations are within that range, that is the assignment for Wale Edun. I do not want to assume that they've not been working on templates. We need to understand how government works. After all, before now, Mohammed Idris, who is not an economist, had disclosed that at 494,000 naira, it will cost the federal government over 9 trillion naira. So that means that they have done certain calculations, but they've not disclosed, how much they will propose to Labour. Labour says it doesn't want 3,000 naira beyond the 60,000 naira. So that's where we are at this level. But certain voices have not been heard in this tripartite committee negotiation. We have not heard from the state governors. 5 years ago, the state governors were very vocal. They kept saying they could not pay 30,000 naira. And many of those states have still not paid that 30,000 naira. The only exception perhaps is Edo State that is paying 70,000 naira. And we have not heard of any noise from Edo State. So where are the subnationals in this equation? Number two, organized private sector even says 60,000 naira will result in job losses. Organized private sector, we also need to hear what organized private sector will say when eventually a decision, an agreement is reached. Now, beyond all of this, we have the National Assembly intervening, saying they will pass whatever is agreed upon expeditiously. We have the House of Reps divided on the matter. Some members of the House of Reps are recommending 120,000, some 75, some 100,000. In the Senate, someone recommended 90,000. I think that's Senator Oshiomhole. But at the end of the day, there are so many voices in the room on this subject. But it is a matter that has to be resolved. Finally, I end with the intervention of Kingsley Moghalu, who had been Deputy Governor of the Central Bank and who understands the subject. He is saying that, look, the thing that we need to solve, and we have made that point ad nauseam on this table, is productivity. He says if there is productivity within the economy, then even if it is 500,000 naira that labor is asking for, government will be able to pay. But because there is problem with wealth creation, there is problem with productivity, there is problem with an enabling environment, then that's why we have all this crisis over minimum wage. So even when there is an agreement with regard to what to pay, questions about productivity will still remain. Those issues that have been raised by Moghalu will still remain. And above that, we will need to still worry about the capacity of the subnationals to pay.
All right, we'll still have a guest later on in the course of today's program to discuss this in detail in terms of two parts, from the organized labor side of things and also from Mr. Osita Okechukwu, who's worked as a former Director General of Voice of Nigeria. So hopefully we'll get a few more in terms of clarity around some areas that are still grey. But I would like to speak about the relaxing of the strike action by organized labor yesterday, because it was met with mixed reaction. And I say this in response to perhaps this was done as a result of the agreement that was signed by organized labor and the federal government with the president making a commitment to ensuring that the workers in Nigeria got a fair deal. And in the spirit of this is probably what prompted the actions by organized labor to at least give them an opportunity for one more week of negotiations with a promise to have conversations every day. So I want to assume that in terms of that cost implication plan or documents that the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy will present to the President in a matter of 2 days, I guess, well, the time is already counting now, so less than 2 days, they would also be able to feed into that process, hopefully. But yesterday, we had talked about the cost of strike actions on Nigerians, and honestly, it's a very difficult conversation and decision, especially from the perspective of organized labor, because as I mentioned yesterday, at the end of the day, it goes back to the government who left it so late to begin to make, deliberate efforts to demonstrate to organized labor that they were serious about considering the plight of Nigerians or of the Nigerian worker. And so you begin, you ask questions around, why did it take them so long? Yes, they say it's better late than never. But why did we have to lose in one day if projections are to go by 300 billion naira in terms of economic loss in one day, and 2 days that's 600 at a time where the country is in dire need of productivity and ensuring that we have some economic stability. Aside from that, of course, is a signal to foreign investors. So the question, for me this morning is that we shouldn't or ought not to get to this point. This conversation has been coming on from probably late last year, early this year, with regards to the fact that we knew that the old minimum wage bill would expire in April of 2024. So why the slowness, as it were? Why this late response to matters of urgent, that should take on urgent, that should be quite urgent. Why should the people suffer? The number of people who had to suffer in the last 2 days when organized labor were forced to go on an industrial action because they didn't see that seriousness shown by the federal government. Why leave it so late? So the reason I'm saying this is because we've seen a number of things like that happen under this administration. It would cost a lot, and then they would go back and say, okay, we'll do X, Y, Z. Well, they talked about CNG buses now. What are the plans? They talk about how it's going to save in terms of not just fuel importation, but also the cost of transportation for Nigerians. But where are those buses today? We also talk about yesterday, the Minister of Finance also presented to the President an accelerated sustainability and advancement plan to see how, to bolster the economic reforms by this administration. So these things come in a bit late. 1 year after this administration, we're having that plan in place, plan being presented. These are questions to be asked, that what is this government doing to ensure that people don't have to suffer because some people are not doing their jobs as they ought to, in terms of plans, in terms of forward planning, in terms of just assessing and forward assessment and ensuring that they're able to mitigate risks that could occur. I hope that at the end of this, the cost implication, both organized labor and the government will reach a convergence. As we already discussed, 494,000 in terms of the implication on the economy, especially with regards to inflation and the cost, and that means the cost of goods and services going, skyrocketing, and the loss of jobs. It might not get to that point. So I believe that it's also important for organized labor to manage the expectations of the people that they represent, and also for the federal government to be fair and present an ideal situation, or at least a fair deal for the Nigerian worker. But finally, I'll just mention something else that has been emphasized is that what organized labor is advocating for is not just the minimum wage. It's also the condition of workers, workers, and also making the economy more productive and strengthening the naira, so that even the purchasing power of the worker can match the amount of money that they're proposing. I think that's something else. So things like welfare provisions for Nigerians, I think that's something else that should definitely be on that table, not just the minimum wage. Because even if you pay 100,000 naira for the Nigerian worker, it's not near enough with regards in parallel to current economic reality. So other things must run side by side in terms of provision and ensuring that people have access to safety nets in Nigeria. Move on to other stories making the headlines this morning. On the foreign scene in the UK, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer traded blows on the economy, the NHS and immigration as they faced off in the first TV debate of the 2024 election campaign. Sunak said Labour wanted to increase tax by £2,000, a claim Starmer dismissed as absolute garbage. In the US, President Joe Biden has issued sweeping new executive actions aimed at curbing record migrant arrivals at the US-Mexico border that have left him politically vulnerable in an election year. While in India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has claimed a historic third win in a row in the country's parliamentary elections, but his ruling alliance appears to have failed to win a large majority as predicted. All right, I don't know if you saw the, they call it trading of blows by Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. The elections are in a matter of weeks, and of course, campaign season is hot at the moment.
I think this thing about not having political talent is a worldwide thing. I am more scared for the UK under a Labour government after that debate yesterday. See, you can call Rishi Sunak anything you want, but Rishi had the answers and the policies to the question. All Keir Starmer was just doing was reminding Conservatives that they had ruined the country in 14 years and reminding them of Liz Truss. Okay, take for instance immigration. Rishi Sunak put forward a plan and said, okay, this is what I will do. This is my Rwanda deal. At least he put forward something. Yeah, you might have international court regulations against the Rwanda deal and things like that. Keir Starmer said he's going to try to block the ring of those that help people across the seas, the cartel. That's not a solution. Otherwise, you always have a cartel that help people go across the seas. But the real solution is, what are you going to do once they come mainland UK? And then Keir Simons has to beat around the bush. As regards education, or employ 6,000 teachers. Where are you going to get the money from? Hence the conversation about the £2,000 that he beat around the bush and said, no, it's an allegation by the Conservatives. On 2-3 occasions, he was asked, what are you going to do to be able to improve waiting time in the NHS? He first rigmarole, oh, my wife works in the NHS hospital. What are you going, he couldn't say it. As regards the doctor's strike, when he was asked the question, the next thing he said was, hey, we're going to negotiate. They've been negotiating with the doctors. The doctors want a 35% pay rise. Can you pay? Where are you going to get the money for? We're going to negotiate. What do you mean by that, Keir Starmer? What is the solution to the problem? What do you have to be able to do? So all in all, see, yeah, Rishi might not have the quick line zingers. Rishi might not have the aggressive nature. But in terms of the empirical facts on what had to be done, in all fairness, and this is an objective as a campaign, Rishi had it. I know Rishi is going to lose.
Polls actually give it to...
but I thought Rishi won the debate yesterday in terms of the clarity of ideas and purpose. So I know, even with Nigel Farage coming with the Reform Party, trying to run for Clacton's seat, I know it's going to make it harder for Rishi. But in terms of real solution to the problem, Rishi has it. It's just that Rishi is already on the losing side. He doesn't have the charisma. You know, there are no... People are just tired of the Conservative Party. But Keir Starmer was not bringing any solution to the table. And that's my fear for the British people. I didn't even see the polls. I just watched the debate yesterday, and I was bigoted at how this is the Keir Starmer lady with like 27% on the polls. The man's got no clue about anything. On 2 occasions, Rishi had to say, okay, what are you going to do? He couldn't answer. He said, oh, can you ask me what Liz Truss has done as regards this? He couldn't answer the question. See, me, my family, my relatives in the UK have always voted Labour. By extension, people that are black in the UK always tilt towards Labour. I will always tilt towards Labour. I'm a Labour supporter, but in terms of it, there was no talent in the Labour Party. Keir Starmer didn't get it right. Jeremy Corbyn probably have even done a good job, but his ideas were the extreme. You will know where he stands. But it was just an aggressive attack. And those are the core issues. Immigration, net migration. Yeah, I thought Rishi also made some baloney by saying, it's reduced by about 1/3. It was not up to a third. I think the number is about just 10,000, the net migration figures. But he had more concrete plan. These people will get into mainland England. What are you going to do about that? That was just my read on the debate. I give it to Rishi Sunak on that debate week.
Well, the BBC has put together a slew of debates ahead of the general elections in the United Kingdom, in Britain. And Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has agreed to take part in at least 2. They want to head a debate yesterday with Rishi Sunak, and then another debate, question time debate, which will involve 4 political parties: Labour, the SNP, the Lib Dems, and also the Tories. Those are the 2 that he has agreed to take part in. But yesterday's one took place. Now, it was a fractious debate. Rishi Sunak was festive, he was rambunctious. Keir Starmer was ill-tempered. 2 major issues coming out of that debate. The issue about taxation, with Rishi Sunak saying that Labour has taxation in the DNA. He said your work, your car, your house, your pension, Labour will tax it. And, you know, you will not have anything to do about it. Now, it was piggybacking on the position that he and the Chancellor are taking, that under the Conservatives, tax will be reduced, including what is called great tax. That's for old people. In fact, instead of triple lock, the Conservatives are proposing a quadrilock. That's what they are proposing, triple lock and extra. It was unfortunate. Keir Starmer had no answer, to the dismay of even members of his own party.
Can you imagine?
The second leg of that debate was migration, where Rishi Sunak dug into the issue about the Rwanda plan. Again, Kestama could not respond to that. But Kestama got an upper hand when it comes to NHIS. And Rishi Sunak was saying, the rates of visitations have improved and all that, to the dismay of the studio audience, which ended up booing Rishi Sunak. But at the end of the day, what I saw was that this was an issue-based process. They're talking about migration, they're talking about taxation, they're talking about pensions, they're talking about housing, they're talking about health, they're talking about housing. Here in Nigeria, what do we do here? We don't have debates. So maybe there are lessons that we can learn from the example that we saw yesterday, whatever may be our position. However, YouGov poll, said Sunak had the edge with 51%, and Kestama scoring about 49%. But would that make any difference in terms of the lead that Labour has? I don't think it's going to make any difference. The projection is that Labour is going to win this election, because after 14 years, the average, British seems to be tired of the Conservatives and wants change. So that's where we are. There will be more debates, but that's the situation in Britain at this moment. To go to India, the second topic you brought up. Well, it was a hit, or if you like, a climb down for Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi wanted about 400 seats in the Lok Sabha, that is the lower parliament, where you have the majority of the parliamentarians. 543 seats in the lower parliament. But the expectation was that the BJP-led National Democratic Alliance will be able to get up to 400 seats. But at the end of the day, they ended up with 240 seats, which was even a climb down from the 292 seats that the BJP-led National Democratic Alliance had in that parliament. Now, what Modi has to do is to form an alliance with smaller parties to be able to form a secure government. But is there some victory for him? Yes. He's been saying that the BJP won, which is historic, because this is the second time in the world's largest democracy that any prime minister will win a third time in office. The last person that won a third term in Indian history was Jawaharlal Nehru, who did 3 terms. So at a personal level, Narendra Modi has made history, and the National Congress Party has done much better, contrary to expectations. That's the main opposition party in India. They got 233 seats in the lower parliament. But the bigger issue, which I think maybe when Rotus comes, he will bring it up, is how the Nifty 50 and the census, the stock exchange in India responded to this. It dropped by within the range of about 5.7%. A few days earlier, when we thought, Modi was going to get, Modi's party was going to get up to 400 seats, the census and the Nifty 50 went up, but there's been, a reduction in the last 24 hours, but showing, of course, that Modi may have secured history, but he will still have a lot more to do with the economy.
Yes, yesterday was quite exciting with regards to the debate between the current British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the man who is looking to take on that job, Sir Starmer, of the Labour Party. As I already said, YouGov polls shows that Rishi Sunak had the edge, but the conversation has always been around to what extent do debates like this on television, televised debates between top opponents politically, have on voter disposition. There are mixed reactions. Some people have done studies looking at debates in Germany, debates in the United States of America, debates in the United Kingdom, and to what extent it could shift voter perception, especially if you see that in the last week, the Conservatives have taken a hard knock, actually not just in the last few weeks, hard knock, and a number of people are projecting a Labour win. So with this debate and it looking like Rishi Sunak had the clear advantage, would it then sway some voters? Most people, or the votes they might get, would be the undecided, those who are in between, not sure as to whether or not to go left or right. But subsequent debates, if going back by the performance of Sir Starmer, could potentially or possibly look at Conservative as a solution to economic, progress. In fact, one of the things that Rishi Sunak leaned on yesterday was the prosperity and the fact that they were on their progress to economic turnaround in the UK based on some of his recent policies. They also used the opportunity to use their backgrounds, in terms of how they have been in touch with the people as to why they are best positioned to deal with some of the challenges that the UK currently faces. Of course, NHS came up in that conversation because governments have had to deal with that big question, even though none seem to have found the solution to this big monster, which is a pride to the United Kingdom, yet not affordable at the moment and consistently growing inefficiently as one of the topics. And Rishi Sunak used the opportunity to talk about the fact that his parents were GPs, his father and mother were in the health sector, whilst Sir Starmer talked about his wife and mother also being in the health sector. But one of the key points as well that was mentioned was on their stance on immigration, with Rishi Sunak saying that based on his Rwandan deal, he implied that he would be willing to pull out of the UK pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights in order to defend his Rwandan deal, because that has come under criticism a lot of times with regards to its impact on upholding the rights of the people whom they hope to take to Rwanda. Whilst Starmer was obviously clearly opposing that, saying that these laws are recognized internationally, they've gone through the process, and so why would they want to break the law in order to defend a deal to tackle immigration? Immigration is a big challenge as well, a big conversation, not just in the UK, but also in the US. And so this is another area where they'd be judged. What came up consistently was, like you mentioned, Rufai, the tax issue and the fact that where Conservatives are saying that with the current living crisis, Labour is going to tax you even more. And that's a big point for a number of people in terms of choosing where or how to vote and what manner to vote. And creative ideas for being able to meet or pay for some of the things that they said they'd do. I don't think either of the candidates was able to answer sufficiently, because if you're saying you're not going to raise taxes, then how are you going to pay for some of these policies that you'd like to introduce? Yes, they talk about national service in terms of a response to youth and unemployment. And I thought that was interesting, because they might want to borrow a leaf or two from the National Youth Service here in Nigeria. Labour is opposed to it, but the Conservatives are saying that that's a way to get young people in the job market and get them to, to get some experience. But Labour is saying we don't need you to run a dad army, a dad camp. Let's not, it's inconsequential. At the end of the day, Rishi Sunak accuses Starmer of not having original ideas and just countering what he was saying and say, what are your ideas? But it's great, again, on a larger scale, a broader scale, to just see what happens when ideas debate with ideas, not mudslinging, not bulldog attack, not trying to deviate or bringing slogans to get people excited, but actually dealing with the real issues. And that is what this election is going to be about. People would vote based on what they hear and also who they believe would lead their country, on the path to prosperity. But I don't know. I know a lot of people have said that it's a clear Labour win, but I'm at this point, it's quite close, and we might see some upsets or surprises in the next few weeks. With due respect,
it's a clear Labour win, Ayo, but I think it's also going to be a Labour disaster when they win. With all of this, take for instance, let me just make a point before I go to India. Right. I wanted to comment on India.
Oh, we need to go.
Oh, okay.
Just land on that point and then we'll leave.
Okay, take 4 points as regards education. Keir Starmer was talking about the fact that he was going to impose VAT for private schools to be able to fund the kind of 6,000 teachers he was getting. He's, in one breath, he's not going to raise taxes, but he's going to impose VAT for private schools to be able to get that money to fund the teachers. So he just keeps convoluting. Concerning India, what I wanted to say is, India also should watch it. There's a shiny growth but it doesn't trickle down. There's an 8.2% growth, yes, which is sitting on the hill, but it's not trickling down, and that's the big Modi debacle.
All right.